morning, everybody. We're back. All right. I am your boy, Tommy D. I like to call myself your boy, Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector. I'm a little embarrassed right now, so my face is as red as my jacket. But that's just the way it is. Sometimes you just got to keep it moving. All right. So we had a little technical difficulty. We're ready to go. The on-air sign is on. The on-air sign is on. Who is this guy with the red jacket? So every single week on a Friday morning, I interview nonprofit executive leaders to help them tell their story and amplify their message. And this whole day is called Storytelling Amplified. So I got to talk to my copyright attorney about that and say what exactly happened, because that's a line I use all the time. And now we're calling the whole day Storytelling Amplified. Shout out to our first presenter, Scott Rosenkrantz. I got to tell you, gang, it was all about AI. If you weren't here for that session, make sure you get a copy from the Nonprofit Resource Hub and plug in and rewatch that or watch it for the first time. Because I was just saying in the backstage room here, it's not optional. You know, I remember being a young guy and saying, hey man, you know what? Hello everybody. Hello, Dancing Classrooms, Long Island. I remember saying, you know, I'm a pen and paper guy. I'm not going to utilize CRM, or I'm not going to utilize technology. I used to say that in my 20s. Gang, in my 40s, there's no options anymore. You got to get in the game. You got to learn. You got to keep evolving. Got to keep getting better at what you're doing. Talk about evolving. What we're going to talk to you about today is networking, relationship building. I just said to my panelists in the backstage room, I said, I want to talk about taking inventory of your network. If you know me, you know I'm connected. You know I'm all about bringing people together as the nonprofit sector connector. If you don't know me, well, I just told you all that. So now you know that. To me, it's about relationship building. It's critically important. And as great as I might be networked wise, if it wasn't for the relationships and social capital, you know, it's not as important. So it's how do you leverage, how do you nurture, and how do you have these collaborative relationships? So I will have each of my panelists introduce themselves. But one last thing I want to say is I don't believe in we're all going after the same dollars. I do believe in abundance where there's opportunity for us to collab, connect, make relationships, and work together. And I see a lot of head nodding, and I see a lot of great stuff in the chat. So I do love you all. I do love all my nonprofit friends. All right, so let's do this. So I had the opportunity, Kylee Serini, who runs our marketing for the Nonprofit Resource Hub and does a great job. She called me up. She said, Tommy D, you're going to do a panel on networking. And I said, well, that kind of makes sense. And she said, who do you want on this panel? And these are the three professionals that I said right away. And this is one of those dreams where, you know, you ask for all three and all three say yes. And that's how we're here. So thank you, Erika, Maheen, and Kylee. There's backstory on how I know you all. If we did that, we wouldn't have any time to teach them about networking. So we're going to get into this discussion right now. So I notice some of my guests are on mute. So I'm going to ask everybody to unmute, come off of mute. I will start with the first LinkedIn profile I'm looking at because I want to give a good morning to my friend, colleague, Maheen Kaleem. The first time I met Maheen, we were in the Institute for Nonprofit Practice together. And I said, I want that person to be my friend. And that was God's honest truth. I said, she's super smart. She's educated. She's networked. She knows her stuff. And I don't. And I want to learn from her. And that's networking in a nutshell. Vice President of Operations and Programs for Grantmakers for Girls of Color. Before that, program officer with the Novo Foundation. Before that was staff attorney with Rights for Girls. Maheen, say hello to everybody. Tell us about your background real quick, please. Good morning.
Hi, everyone. So good to be here. I'm really excited for this discussion with Kylee and Erika and Tommy D, of course. My name is Maheen. I use she, her pronouns, and I am and as Tommy D said, I'm the Vice President of Programs and Operations at an organization called Grantmakers for Girls of Color, which we affectionately call G4GC. What we do is basically mobilize resources. So we raise money to re-grant, and then we think about other financial resources really specifically focused at organizations and movements like social justice movements that are led by and center girls and gender expansive youth of color. I'll be quick, but I'll say that we launched in 2020. We have raised and re-granted about $25 million. We fund in all 50 states, Guam and Puerto Rico, a lot of funding in New York City. So really excited to be in discussion with these amazing leaders and to talk about, I love to talk about resourcing in ways that are not just about financial resources, but all the other ways that we can resource each other, because money is necessary and we need it to run our organizations. And there's so much more we can do when we think beyond just money. I will turn it back to you, Tommy D, to ask the next person to introduce
Thank
themselves.
you. I love that. That was great. It's funny when you get a bunch of leaders in the room because everybody's like, am I running this meeting? Let me get back to Tommy D. Like we're all, you know what it is? That's what happens when you hang out with leaders who run meetings and run sessions all the time. All right. I'm thinking of a number from 1 and 10. Erika, pick a number.
12.
Between 1 and 10.
8.
Oh my goodness. Skip. Kylee, pick a number between 1 and 10. Try 6.
Oh, I was gonna pick 3, but now you threw me for a curveball here.
Say 6.
6.
Kylee goes first. Good. It's always
Okay.
6. When I ask anybody between 1 and 10, the number is always 6. There's people laughing in the audience because I've done that to them before. Kylee McGrane, incredible story. We met through the New York City Imagine Awards. I had an opportunity to connect with you and interview you. Yeah, I mean, I want to tell some of the story because I love telling your story, but founder and executive director from back in 2014 of A Moment of Magic. Please tell this story. I mean, I've told it 100 times. You've probably told it 1,000. Please tell them who you are.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm so excited to be here today. Like Tommy, I feel like this morning, I don't know about anybody else, I also faced technical difficulties. Zoom just didn't believe that I was me and I had to change my passwords and everything. So it's been quite a morning, but I'm so excited to be here with all of you. Networking is so important and it's so critical to running our businesses and growing and most importantly, collaborating. And it's been key to being a part of A Moment of Magic, which is a nonprofit organization that started in my college dorm room in the Bronx back in 2014. It was inspired by my experience of my grandparents both being hospitalized long-term. I watched their experience of going through medical treatments and being away from home and being away from each other, and how that really not just affected their health, but also their spirit. And they were what I like to think of as the real life Notebook story. They were married for 65 years and they passed away within 2 weeks of each other. And while they were hospitalized, I was trying to find ways that I could make a difference for them. And I couldn't fix the circumstance they were in, but I could try to make it a little bit better. So I would basically just become a menace to the hospital staff and sneak in their favorite food and decorate the hospital room. And when I was a high school senior, I would come in to see them before any big event. And as a high school senior, that's prom, that's formal, that's graduation. So I'd literally come and see them in my big prom dress. And when they passed away, those were the memories that I thought about, was walking through the hospital in my prom gown and laughing with them about how silly it all was, but how they felt so important. So I tried to recreate that by visiting Cohen's Children's Hospital in Long Island, dressed like Elsa from Frozen. And it became really a big purpose in my life. And I saw college students wanting to get involved and an underutilized resource. So we decided to kind of mobilize college students across the country and get them involved in local pediatric hospitals. And now flash forward about a decade, we work with 30 colleges across the country and almost every children's hospital to bring in college students and provide this type of programming for kids that really need it.
I love it. I don't know this word I see used often, activation. And as I was hearing you talk about what goes on these campuses, and I have some understanding of what you've done there, it's incredible, man. You know, it's not, you know, college is not all those movies you see where people are at the fraternity house, you know, having parties, gang. There's people making real impact on these universities. And I mean, maybe that sounds ridiculous that I even have to point it out, but it's true. And maybe we'll talk more about that today because I want to understand how the sororities and fraternities get involved. Let's move over to my friend Erika Floreska. Erika, you know, when we first met, we met at the Long Island Children's Museum. I was there a couple of weeks ago at a nonprofit resource hub event. If you haven't been to the Long Island Children's Museum, gang, listen, you got to go. They got bubbles. They got these big bubble wands that you can play with. Yes, I'm like a child. I like to play with the bubbles at the Long Island Children's Museum. If you want to network with me, why don't we go do that? Erika, you were the development officer there when we first met. Now you're executive director of the organization, the Long Island Children's Museum, hundreds of thousands of visitors. And I learned recently, many of your visitors come from Queens, more so from Queens than from Suffolk County. So please introduce yourself, take it away.
Thank you, Tommy. Thank you to my other panelists. I'm learning already with you guys. I'm like, oh, we gotta connect. I really appreciate the invitation to be on this because I think networking and connecting is essential to what we do in the nonprofit world. So as Tommy said, I'm at the Long Island Children's Museum. I became president last June after 3 years as development director. LICM is, we serve about over 300,000 people a year. That's through the general visitors to the museum, school field trips, birthday parties, outreach programs. We go out into the community. And then we have 3 key community access programs, one for children and families with disabilities, making the museum available and open to them once a month at our friendly hours for free. We work with the Westbury School District in an intensive STEM learning project with all first, second, third graders and all special education students. And then we do a summer program Together to Kindergarten. That's a special program for new immigrant families where we work with the children who are about to enter kindergarten and their parents about how does the US school system work? How do you set your kids up for success in education? That's been going on almost 15 years, and we have incredible stories of that program, just 4 weeks, really setting kids up and their families to be successful in the US school system. We also have access programs for military families, making the museum affordable, and for low income families on EBT or SNAP benefits, they can get $2 or $3 tickets. So LICM's whole philosophy is we're here for everyone. One of my platforms is that raising kids is hard today, harder than ever in many ways. And how do we work with each other and each of the other sister organizations or brother organizations in supporting our children and families and parents and teachers? And Tommy, the last quick thing on my intro, when you said you believe in abundance, that is my message. I think there's enough to go around. There are enough resources if we're creative and thoughtful. And what do we do best? How can LICM be a gathering place, a place of joy, a place of connection for children and families? And how can we partner with others who may provide other services that we don't provide, but are necessary in supporting our community? And you did have a reference there, just so everyone knows, about 50% of our audience comes from Nassau County, almost 20% from Queens, 19% from Suffolk County. So they're pretty close.
Yeah.
And then we do get folks from Brooklyn, every single zip code on the island. And we do have some visitors from out of town as well.
I love it. I love that. I mean, you know, it's not easy. It's not an automatic to come from abundance every day, gang. Sometimes you got to remind yourself of that. I would admit sometimes scarcity sneaks in. So if you have that too, it's all good. Give yourself a hug, man. I'm big on hugs, man. Give yourself a hug. If you need some support on that though, you just gotta, it's about decision making, and it's about making a different decision every day. All right. So let's get into this. One last point I want to, Together to Kindergarten. That program sounds incredibly awesome. I can't wait to be a part of it this summer. I will be bringing Italian ices. Gang, if you're here on Long Island, my dad owns Ralph's Italian Ices in Huntington. I will be going there this afternoon to, how do I say, take Italian ices that don't belong to me and then bringing them to Big Brothers Big Sisters event out in Long Island. So connect with me, TommyD.NYC on Instagram. And if you don't know me by now, you'll figure out how to get me. All right, let's get into this conversation really, because there's no topic I enjoy more than talking about networking and connecting. And it's funny because I'll be at an event just recently when we were at Erika's place, and I had to tell everybody, okay, please stop networking because we have to like do something else. And like, that's like kryptonite to me. I'm like, I don't want to do this, man. But sometimes we got to pull it back and draw it back. I want to get into, you know, I want people to walk away with best practices. And I think best practices come from, hey, you should try to do this thing, or best practices come from storytelling. You know, and that's what we're doing here today. It comes from storytelling. Hey, Tommy, here's what we did at our organization, and here's the outcome. And this might, and then those listeners will feel, oh, maybe I should try to do that, or that might be an area of opportunity. And I have to imagine, because I saw my panelists dropping their LinkedIn information in the chat, that everybody would be open to connecting with these other people, because it's kind of what we're talking about, right? So if you have questions, follow up on the LinkedIn and things like that. I want to start with this. Anybody can just, I'll kind of see who wants to jump in first. I don't want to call on people just yet, but let's look at it this way. When did you realize, when you were either a founder or in development, right? Or, you know, in your multiple roles, Maheen, where you realize, oh man, I actually have to network now. You know, I have to go out and meet people, because like, even me, like 1 out of 100 times I walk into an event and don't feel comfortable. So it happens to me. So I can imagine what it's like for other people who aren't necessarily out there and outgoing and don't want to do it. So was there a point where you realized, oh shoot, if I want this organization to grow, or if I want to meet the right grantees, or I want to meet the right funders, I better figure out how to do this. Anybody want to start with that? Maheen?
Yeah, I think relationships are everything. So I haven't had a job that I didn't get because I didn't have a relationship with someone. So I don't know that And I think that is, I think in the nonprofit, well, ultimately we're trying to do good in the world, and ultimately we're trying to achieve justice in the world, right? And you can't do that alone. So I feel like, and Kylee, I loved your story because I started doing this work, like I was in high school and college working with young folks that were incarcerated and running tutoring programs, and I was networking with them. I was building relationships. They were teaching me so many things. And then I ended up, and you need to get resources. And when you're young, you don't have money. So you're like, who can I go to get the resources I need to provide support to the people that I care about? So I would say the answer to when is that it's always been there. I think we can get in later into the conversation about what stops us. I think particularly when you're in spaces where you're the only woman or the only person of color, or the only woman of color, there's like all of those things add layers to how comfortable you feel. But I kind of want to invite us to think about things less as networking and more as relationship building, because I think networking can feel daunting, and it can also feel transactional. Like it can feel like I'm going to these people because I need something from them. And I've actually realized that the most beautiful partnerships are really about building relationships, letting them breathe, and then seeing what beautiful things come out of those relationships.
Absolutely love it. I mean, I totally agree with you. We do call it networking, and unfortunately it gets that sort of negative connotation because there's sales professionals out there or business people who treat this as a prospecting activity when it is not a prospecting activity. It is a relationship building activity. Guys, don't get me going on that. We'll be here for an hour, just me ranting about that. Kylee, since Maheen called you out, what do you have to add to that? Was there a point where you realized this, or you just naturally, I mean, you have an incredible personality, you're outgoing. Was that always just, you always had all these friends and connections, or what?
Well, first, thank you. I appreciate that. I am naturally an introvert. So I think sometimes when we think about networking, it seems very intimidating, especially if we're going into a place where we don't have natural connections already. We don't know anyone in the room. We kind of want to be a wallflower and stay on the side. And when I was walking into a lot of the rooms, I was 21, 22, fresh out of college, didn't have a lot of professional experience, but I was asking people to believe in this thing that I believed in. And I think what I've learned more than anything is that storytelling is really powerful, but so is authenticity. And I think when we lean into that and we show up in spaces as we are and authentically, and we say to people, this is what I do, and this is why I think it's important. I think we invite those conversations a little bit more naturally. People know if you're going to a networking mixer, we're there to meet people, we're there to make connections. We all know why we're there. We're not there at the end of the day to have someone write us a check, but we do want to make these connections to hopefully be long lasting. But I think really leading with authenticity, when we are ourselves, we give other people the permission to be themselves too. And I think that's really powerful. So showing up in that way, I think, is what's most important.
Oh my God, I love it. I pick the right three friends to come off this conversation, or what? Erika, from a development perspective, which is some of your background, obviously development, and I'm going to say a bad word here on the show, but development is kind of sales. Now I'm going to, but it is. But being a sales guy, I feel like it's okay for me to say that. You have to meet people. There's not even really an option when you're talking about development. Maybe if you're an ED somewhere, you can stay in-house and nobody has to know who you are. But really on the development side, that's not happening. So can you speak to a little bit of that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't second what Maheen and Kylee also said in this relation. It's relationship building. And I was born into this. My family is very extroverted, and I've always had an outgoing personality. So my experience of walking into a room I had to learn is really not anyone else, or not many other people's. So I've done a lot of mentoring with staff on how to develop networking skills, particularly introverts or folks who I don't know if I belong, some of those questions. And I just say every time, especially if it's a networking event or an event with mixed, groups that work for nonprofits or even corporations. One, you're coming in for here with the Long Island Children's Museum. A lot of people have a relationship to it. And a lot of people, if they don't, you can talk about something, we're here for families. We have a really easy message to send. But the other thing is be curious about other people. If, a great way, pick one person, find out where they work, and just a simple question, how did you get into your field? And if you start at the personal level, I think authenticity, particularly if you're not comfortable with a big group, pick a person, pick another person, but start learning about them and their career and their organization often then creates the reciprocal where then you might be more comfortable talking about that. I also try to, if they're going to places where, if I'm going with them, I will like hold some of my staff with me and make sure they introduce and kind of, sample or, lead by example. But I also try to prep them if they're going to an event that I can't go to, who might be someone that they can find or that they meet that I have a connection with, and say, hey, make that connection. And here's one little line of, and that's it. I mean, really, it's like they feel like they have to come back and say they've achieved something or done something. It's like we're building a relationship.
100%.
And I think the sales name, I don't think it's a dirty name, because what I'm selling is children and fun and joy
Yeah.
and connection and community. And if you come at it authentically, then it's just talking about a mission you believe in with people who are interested. And if they're not, move to someone else. If there isn't an automatic connection or a feeling, then, gently say, oh, thanks, I'm going to get a drink, or move on, or go to the next person.
Yeah, I know the slip away. I've done it before. I mean, people must think I go to the bathroom a lot, because sometimes I go, excuse me one second, I gotta run to the restroom. Sometimes when the conversation, but what my favorite move is when I see somebody at an event out of the corner of my eye who's alone. I can't have it happening. I can't. Excuse me. If I'm here with the three of you, I'll say, excuse me, and I'll walk away and go, not physically grab that person. I don't cost people, but I would say, hi, I'm Tommy D. Nice to meet you. Welcome here. Even if it doesn't have to be my event. Right. I make every event my event, because I want to feel like I'm the host. And I think that's what ingratiates you to people too. I mean, when you say, hey, come on over here, come meet my friends, be part of this conversation, because Kylee, I think you said about, a wallflower, some people might walk in through. It's intimidating. Let's be honest, gang. I mean, I love it, but I'm a strange bird, I think, in a lot of cases. Not everybody loves doing this thing. So, but you can, if it's about the mission. And, when I do my radio show, Philanthropy in Focus, I was telling somebody just last week who had never done a show like this, wanted to come on my show soon. And I said, look, I get you're nervous. I'm nervous. I'm nervous right now speaking to you three. I mean, I'm nervous because people are putting information in the chat and things like that. I'm nervous because I care. But when I think we take ourselves out of it and know we're doing it for the mission. And Jamae makes a comment, Jamae Crowder, makes a comment in the chat saying development is selling good feelings. I think it's selling the mission. It's selling good vibes. It's selling, what I like to say is, with props, no big deal, just changing the world. Yeah, that's what leaders like you all are doing. And I don't just mean the three that are on the screen with me. I mean, all those that are in the chat, because I saw there's over 100 people checking in with us today. So really, really special. What about this? What if you take, Maheen, I want to ask you this, because I wrote this question earlier, and as a funder, I wanted to ask you how you go about building relationships. We are crossing out the networking word. How are you building relationships? Not only, really, I want to know with grantees, and really from your perspective, how important is it for you all at Grantmakers for Girls of Color, for grantees and prospective grantees, to make sure they build a relationship with you? Because some people on this call are organizations that are looking for funding, and I think they should be aware of that. That's not necessarily an instinctual thing to figure out how to do all that from a development perspective. So I think I have a question in there somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think your question is sort of like, how do you build relationships with funders, and how important is that? I will say, I sat inside a family foundation before, and now I'm in an intermediary space where I have to raise all the money I regrant. So I get this beautiful opportunity to kind of be similarly positioned to a lot of the organizations we support, while also remembering what it's like on the other side, and having come up in nonprofits as a young person. I've only ever worked in nonprofits. And so I think every funder is different, is what I will say. And I know that's not the answer, but I had 7 hours of calls with different organizations yesterday, and they're all like, where can I get funding? What's happening? It's really rough out here. And who do I know? And unfortunately, philanthropy, it can often be like a black box, right? Like that you're trying to figure out who you know. I think I'll just say at G4GC, we try to approach what we call our grandmother's philanthropy, and like really engaging this notion of reciprocity, that like we give to our grantees, they give to us. Like fundamentally, we believe that if we're going to achieve justice, we need to be investing in girls of color. And so we are collectively winning when these things are happening. I think about the Long Island Children's Museum. I'm like, if we are investing in a space where young people, particularly families who don't have places to go with their children, can have moments of joy, how important is that in terms of like the fabric of our communities? So I think that it is really helpful when people know people, right? Like it is part of the reason we're an intermediary is because we have relationships that many of our grantees don't have, and we fund everywhere in the country. So if you're looking at, organizations in Alabama or South Carolina where there isn't a lot of foundation presence, part of our job is to build those relationships. So for me, it's not that important. I've given money to organizations that I've never met the AD. I've literally sent them an email and said, I love your mission. I follow you on Instagram. I see you doing all this work with girls. Here's the money. But that is partially because I know how much work it takes. And so we're trying to lighten the load. I think generally speaking, when you are fundraising, the relationship building is really important. And the thing that I'll offer to folks is, despite the fact that people choose to be in foundations and philanthropic spaces, they don't like to be solicited for money, which I personally think is weird because I'm like, you took this job to give away money. So why are you mad when people ask you for money? But a lot of folks don't like to be directly solicited, right? And so it feels weird and you're always trying to figure out the angle. But to Erika's point, I think it's about getting to know people and really understanding who they are, why they care about what they care about. It also cuts down time for you, is what I will say, because a lot of foundations, there's only so much you can explain on a website, and a lot of them don't have websites, right? So if you don't know what the approach of that particular program officer or that particular foundation is, if you don't understand where they're coming from, you might be barking up the wrong tree. You might be looking for money that is not actually intended for you because they actually have a really specific focus within that thing. Funders like to say, well, we care about racial justice. Organizations that are doing direct service, will say, well, we're working with students of color and we're engaging them in advocacy. And funders are weird. And sometimes they'll be like, well, we don't fund direct service. We only fund advocacy, which I have a whole other issue with. But I think that part of it is, for me, if people know that I really care about young people that have been impacted by systems, by foster care, juvenile justice, child welfare, by sexual violence, when an organization comes to me and they know that my background, to Erika's point, how did you get into this work? And I'm like, girls told me to do this work and I needed to do it. Then they can lead with that in a way that really helps me understand how their work is connected to whatever it is that we care about. I think that's really true with individual donors too. You have to understand what people's motivation is, because you also want to be in funding relationships where people actually really believe in what you're doing and they're not giving just to get, listen, take the money where you can get it, but it's always better when you have a donor who's really invested in what you do. And that does take the reciprocal relationship building. So to answer your question, not that important to me. I just care that you're doing the work, but the relationships help. And the last thing I'll say is, for us, for me, because I hope, and this is what our grantees say to us, the relationship is not transactional. People can also be open about where they're struggling. A lot of our grantees will call me and be like, I'm really struggling. I had this staffing issue. I don't know what to do. And that's really hard to do with funders. And we can strategize around like, who can I put you in touch with? How can I help you solve this problem? Which if you don't have a relationship, you don't know to trust your funder. And so for me, it's very important that I build relationships with our grantees where they can come to us when they're hurting and when it's hard, and not just sell the big successes. Because if I'm truly invested in your success, then I'm going to show up for you when it's not easy. And that kind of relationship is only built over time and with a lot of intention.
Well, thank you, Maheen. That's a partnership. That's what it sounds like to me. That's not, hey, we'll send you the check and then you can come back and ask for more money down the road. That's like, and as I was hearing you tell that story, I think about that grantee, and I'm sure it isn't just one, though that's happened many, many times to you. And it's like, there's fear. There's shame to that, right? Like, can I really, I gotta ask them for money. How could I tell them that I don't have my stuff together, so to speak, right? That's a scary thing to deal with. And the fact that you've established a relationship, and I use the word partnership there, is that's critical, that they're willing to share and and utilize and leverage your other resources aside from just dollars. I think that's some of what I was hearing you say too.
Yeah, and I would, well, sorry, the
yeah.
last thing I'll say is I think it's specific to the thing, right? Like you have to gauge where your time is best spent. As Erika and Kylee well know, like this takes time and it takes a lot of resources and it takes like energy. And so part of building the relationship helps you determine which relationships you really want to invest in and which ones actually don't feel like the best use of your time.
I like that. I'm going to go from there. Let's take that. I wanted to see if Kylee and Erika had something. And Kylee, I apologize. It's Kylee McGrane-Zarnoch. I knew her when she was Kylee McGrane, so I screwed that up at the beginning of the show. So Kylee and Erika, from take off some of what Maheen said, if you like, and then also, how do you decide and as I said earlier, take inventory and gang, this is as easy as, yes, you're going to use a CRM and maybe you're going to use Razor's Edge, and shout out to my friend Christine Deska. Maybe you're going to use Bell's board for your board, but a Sharpie is really good too. And you can write down like, here are the people, here are the categories of people I need to meet. So here's and who do I know? Who can I ask for connections? Let's talk about that though. How do you analyze and take inventory of who the heck should I meet? Because there's so many stakeholders for organizations. Kylee.
I think for me, one of the most important things that we've done is kind of looked at the organization strategically and evaluated our gaps, right? So nonprofit organizations never have enough funding. We always want to do more. We always want to grow. We always want to expand our mission or expand our programs. And that takes more capital, more staffing, et cetera. So that's an easy area to say, this is where we have to grow, but what does that look like? And who are our target population that we want to connect with? But I think what was really helpful for us is like, who will get our mission? Who will understand right away what the experience is like for a child that's hospitalized? And what we really understood is when we go through the grant application process, we were getting a lot of feedback that there were things that were common for us to understand, or we knew right away because we were so in the weeds, that our funders really weren't understanding. So, for example, we work very closely with a position at a hospital called the child life specialist. They basically are a patient advocate for a child. A child doesn't understand what chemotherapy is. They don't know what a port access is. They don't know what radiation is. A child life specialist basically translates what they're going through and explains it to a child and advocates on their behalf. That's an amazing position, but that's in an ideal situation. That's if the hospital has the staffing for that child to have access. That's if a child has a parent that knows that that's someone that should be there, or they have the funding for that. That's if the parent has access to a pediatric hospital in general and they're not going to an adult hospital. That's like, it has to be this perfect situation. So we were trying to explain this to our funders and they didn't even know that situation existed. So if we can kind of figure out who will be that funder that already understands that kind of expedites the process, or how do we find the funder and explain it to them in a way that educates them and brings them along in this journey. So we kind of have to do two things at once. And I think as the executive directors or the leaders or the founders, we are so passionate and like enthusiastic about our storytelling, but we have to create brand ambassadors in our organization. And for us, when I look at our college students, I work with about 1,300 millennial and Gen Z volunteers across the country. I have them rattle off the mission statement at every single meeting they go to because they need to live it, eat, sleep, breathe, 100% stand behind that mission statement. And they do, and they get it. And when they go in front of people, they can tell you why we do what we do, but why they do it. And that's really important too.
That's incredible. And I heard some of what you're saying was kind of reducing the friction. So kind of like the idea of, yeah, we're going to have to educate some people on this. However, if we can focus on some grantmakers that actually get it, that are in this space, that speak, that have the language and vernacular that we're talking about. So think about that, folks, ladies and gentlemen, who are listening in. Think about that. Who are the people who understand just by the nature of what they're involved in, who understand the work you're doing? I think that's great. And the education piece. And then the fact that you're creating thousands of leaders around the country. I mean, that's just so incredible. And I know, Maheen, your organization does much of that with the conferences and leadership and all that. And I mean, I want to talk, Maheen, let's put a pin in that back. I want to talk, we're going to go to Erika. When we come back to Maheen, I want to talk about like, you know, how you have the advisory board of the people that the organization serves are very influential in a lot of the way of the organization. So that's networking to me, or relationship building. Strike that. I feel like Willy Wonka, strike that, reverse it. All right, Erika, Floreska, let's talk even about that. Like, how do you decide, like, you know, you are the Long Island Children's Museum. That's a big deal. It's in the name. You know, I love when the thing is in the name, kind of like the nonprofit sector connector. But I just think as the Long Island Children's Museum, there's responsibility there, there's name recognition there, and you probably don't need any more money because you probably got everything you need. So you're probably all set, right? You got the name recognition, right? You can just like, you're good, you're all set, right? And shout out to, we know you have a new team member, our very good friend. Can we shout her out?
We sure can. She starts next week. Erika White is joining us as the new development director. Starting next week. She's been at the Nassau or Suffolk County Girl Scouts doing great work there. I'm excited to have her join the team. Yeah, I was thinking, no, even with the name recognition and the reach across the island, as all nonprofits, we're always looking for ways to grow and deepen the impact. So resources are always needed to grow and make sure you're doing more. So that's, I used to work, before my life before this was in the performing arts. I worked at Jazz at Lincoln Center, and it had the Lincoln Center name, and it's like, oh, you have everything you need. It's like,
right.
No. The bigger the budget, the bigger the problem, right? But anyway, what I actually thought I might offer is a couple of those logistic questions about how do you choose who you do. Like, I actually, when I go to these, any networking session or any conference like this, any panel, and get, you meet people, you get their business cards. I literally will write on the business card what was the nature of the conversation or what might be a follow-up, and I bring them back and they're in a spreadsheet and they're categorized. So there is a formal sort of process for intaking all of these meetings I have. And I'm not sure when I might go back to someone, because I do have right now a real problem of more people than I can get to, but I've got a list. And then Kylee, what you had said is like, where is the need or where is the gap? What's the issue I'm focused on now? And I try to be systematic, not quite there yet, till once Erika comes and I can take off the second hat. Who on this list can help connect me to someone who might help address that gap? But it is an active thing. I mean, that's because I come by this very naturally, my nature. I mean, Tom, the personality, when you have that connection personality, people are like, oh, you just do it. I'm like, no, there's actually a system behind it. And there's a check-in, and there's, I might meet someone last year at the Nonprofit Resource Hub Network, and I'm like, oh wait, now I need a employment lawyer. Oh, I met Doug back there. Let me reach out to him. But it's because I had him on this list, and I have, I make those connections and think, where might the link be? It may not be right now. And so then I may really like someone. The hardest one is if you really like someone, but you haven't quite found that match. You're like, oh, that's just a cool person. But you have them on the list, you think about them, you send them a note. When something comes up in a conversation, it also triggers something, like the little text to somebody, hey, thinking about you, you came up in a conversation, that can keep a relationship alive or active. You don't know when you're going to revisit, but those little things are all a part of networking. And don't ever, it's like there is a system, there is a thought, because this is such a valuable part of creating the relationships, creating the connections to resources or partners. Or I really believe you're putting out good energy and it's going to have that ripple effect, like the ambassadors that you're creating, or maybe the advisory board that Tommy mentioned, like the more folks you get speaking your language or, doing the sales pitch, which isn't really a sales pitch because it's a belief in something good, it really does create a ripple. And when we're in the nonprofit world, there's always more to do, but the more we can engage and send those positive ripples and those connection opportunities, it'll come back. You don't always know how or when, and it's never as soon as you want it to be.
I think I love that. And so I'm gonna read a couple things from the chat, which we'll get to in that 1 second, because I got to say a few words. First of all, Maheen Kaleem, right? I said, I want to make her my friend. That's what I really want to do. And that was like in a room full of like 80 people, we were in this cohort, and then we had a little baby cohort, and it was like, 9 of us. And we had such great relationships, the 9 or 10 of us that were in our smaller cohort, and we don't talk Some of us probably do, but we don't talk on a regular basis. But I knew that I could reach out and ask Maheen to do this because I knew she would see the impact of this type of work, obviously getting in front of people and educating. But we don't talk regularly, Maheen, right? It's just like, but I think of you, you think of me, you still call me Tommy D as soon as it came on. Right? But you don't have to see people every day, like Erika says. But it's about finding some way to nurture those relationships. I want to just shout out a couple things. Dottie says, I send handwritten cards with my logo to people I meet when I want to build relationships. They really appreciate that special touch. Right around 10:45 every morning, I get to feed the dopamine fix because I know the mailman put envelopes inside of my mailbox. Gang, we don't get enough paper mail. And if you do that, you certainly differentiate yourself. So shout out. What are we saying here? MJ says, serendipity is real. I texted a TGIF meme to a former coworker and she replied, hey, want to write a grant that just came up in this meeting? So obviously MJ does grant work. So gang, just staying on, the staying on people's radar thing. Before I keep asking you guys questions, I got to send some love out to my friend Eileen Minogue. Eileen is the executive director, which has been now for 5 years, which I cannot believe she's been the executive director of Book Fairies for the last 5 years. But when she took on the role, Amy Zaslansky, the founder, had given her some business cards and some file folders and different things like that. And that was their database. And I don't say that out of turn because Amy said it in public and things like that. What did Eileen do? She said, we need one source of truth. And they used salesforce.com. And salesforce.com, I'm not here to promote them, but they do have a free version for nonprofits, as I understand. And yes, it's a shell that needs to be maybe tweaked and different things like that. But Eileen has done several meetings for me and also several educational type Zoom meetings for leaders of nonprofits to help them talk about Salesforce and the benefits. My question to my panelists is, okay, one of my panelists just gave me a note. So why don't you, I was going to ask you, what, if anything, are you all using? So Maheen, you start since yes, Amy Zaslansky says, Eileen is the best connector that I know other than Tommy D. Well, I love you, Amy Zaslansky, and I love Eileen. And you guys are all nonprofit sector connectors, not just me. Maheen, what about, talk to me about salesforce.com.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we use Salesforce for a whole host of reasons, one on the grant side and one on the fundraising side. But I think, we were able to take advantage of a nonprofit discount at least to be able to do it. And so we built it pretty early on because we needed just a way to keep track of like different touch points that we have. You can throw notes in there, you can send emails from there. So, I'm not a tech person, so technology always feels daunting to me, and that it exists for a reason and people are using it. And so I know there are other tools out there, but I think having some, whether it's, we had 17 spreadsheets. I always joke, like with all our grants, we had like 17 spreadsheets. When I came in, I was like, I can't find the information I need in one place. And so having things in one place, I think the thing that I will say about any kind of system is you implement it and then you have to like make people use it, right? So like,
Right.
I think, and you have to discipline yourself to use it, right? So when you finish a meeting, you go to a conference, we come back and you kind of have to like set out that half day where you're like, I'm doing my follow-up, I'm entering the notes that I need to do, or I'm asking someone on my team to do it if that's their job and that's what they're trained to do. So I would just say, I think whatever you use, we found it to be really helpful, but whatever you use, make sure you're using it because you've spent probably resources and time and investing in building it.
Yeah, that's just because you bought the thing doesn't mean you have to change practices. You have to change what you do. You have to utilize it. Erika, do you use anything specific like in your past or at LICM?
Yeah, I was going to say, this is like one of those lift up the thing. We do have an all-true system. It's a blackboard system that runs the museum. It's not great for networking and tracking. So a lot of that is in a spreadsheet. And one of the things that with Erika coming on and the team I have here that I already started building was how can we use the all-true system better to not just track the archive of donations, because that all goes in, but actually to track these relationships. So we all are learning some functionality and ways to use it, even though that system is not built for it. But we don't have the any fancy. I would love a Salesforce. I've heard it does everything. But really we use Alltrue and spreadsheets. I mean, Excel documents, they're still a helpful resource, or Google Sheets.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, listen, those are great resources. And I will tell you, I mentioned our friend Eileen, and it wasn't like everything was there with Salesforce when she got it. It was, that she had hired a consultant to do some different work and maximize and customize and things like that. So it is a shell that has functionality, but definitely needs to be worked over. Kylie, do you all use something like that as well?
We do. We use, we're utilizing Google Sheets right now. We utilize a little bit with Aplos, which is our accounting software. MailChimp is really good too, just for our newsletter marketing, and we can kind of see what that touch base looks like. But I know we're a small organization insofar as I'm the only full-time staff. So I know a lot of this tracking can seem really intimidating. And what I would advise, especially small nonprofits, is don't underestimate the power of social media. People love to follow social media, and that's a really easy place to share your impact stories in short, bite-sized ways. And doing it regularly really makes a difference. It makes people feel connected to your organization.
How many people watched that first video when this organization got started? How did you, this was viral. So tell us about that.
So the reason why our organization was able to expand from my college dorm room was because we had a video reach 68 million views. And that literally catapulted us from my college dorm room to a national organization. And it's really that authentic, true, heartfelt storytelling that we're all capable of. It connects with people. It makes a difference. And just sharing, how many lives you impacted in the last month and what that donation did on an Instagram post, that makes a really big difference. Even if you can't do individualized outreach every single day, that makes a difference.
I want to make people laugh because this will show my age a little bit. So like people want to communicate in so many different ways, right? So I like to talk to people on the phone. People text message me. Sometimes I talk on Slack. Sometimes people want to communicate on LinkedIn. People want to send me a message on Instagram, Facebook. And I used to think all those things were just to eventually get off that thing to get on a phone call. And I really thought that, like, I always for years thought that ultimately was just, but no, people never talk to each other and just communicate through these tools. And that's the only thing. I like your thing, you like my thing, you shared my thing, you reposted your thing. And then that was like, and that is the relationship in a lot of cases. And maybe we connect and actually have a dialogue once a year, or maybe never. Like that's, to me, I got to be honest, I am not a digital native. I was born in 78, cusper, a little bit. But I remember when the little man on AOL was running across the screen, my Gen Xers remember. Some of you don't know what I'm talking about, but it was like a sound. And
I'm with you, Tommy.
Remember, Erika, just to get, I'm on the internet, hang up the phone, like that sort of deal, right? So I remember when we didn't have it, but those digital natives and people, younger and younger people, this is all we know, this is their life. So these platforms are not just used to get to the meeting, but they actually, in a lot of cases, are the meeting. Have you, Kylie, have you found, your stuff is so great because the storytelling that you do is so special, meaning not that other organizations aren't special, but to see princesses and superheroes helping children, that is really video worthy. That's really good stuff, right? So where do you, Instagram, right? Where do you play? I know you're on Facebook. You guys have a good presence on Facebook too. Talk to us about that.
I think it depends on who's the audience you're trying to reach. The content we post on TikTok is very different than the content we post on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is where we're trying to find potential board members or members for committees, or, that's where we want to provide updates to people who have donated or grant opportunities. TikTok is where we're trying to find our future volunteers. That's where our college students are. That's where our high school students are. So you might not be able to do everything on all of the social media platforms. So focus, where do you see the most need right now, and develop a strategy there and then work your way out.
Yeah, where's your audience, gang? Right, that's the question. Where, and you have we all know we have multiple audiences. We have our board members. At times, some of our board members, older boards, they're not going to be on TikTok. Not that all of our boards look like that anymore, but there's different. Where are we going to meet our stakeholders? Maheen, I know you deal with a lot of young people. The organization works with young people. I know talk to me about that advisory board that I sort of teased about, and then if you could speak to social a little bit too, since we're talking about that.
Yeah, so when we started, we were like, we can build this thing that's intended for young people and then pull them in, or we can do it with them. So when we launched as sort of our own entity, because we were sort of a learning community before, we started a youth advisory board of young people from organizations that we were already funding. So that wasn't like organizations were trying to pitch their young people to us. We went to them and we said, do you have young people that would be interested in building this philanthropic institution that is meant for them? And so they were with us for a year and a half. It was paid. They looked at our policies, our communications, like we did a lot of dreaming with them. Like, what do you want this institution that is meant to resource organizations that are supporting you and led by you supposed to be? So they looked at, you know, if you're getting international grants, there are a lot of requirements around child safeguarding, right? You have to have a child safeguarding policy. The young people helped us write our child safeguarding policy. What does it mean for you to be safe? And how do you want people and organizations to respond? And then, you know, I'm a lawyer, so I had to kind of tweak it to make it legal, but that's an example of some of the ways that we did it. The main thing that they said to us, so we also do a lot of participatory grant making. So young folks decide on our grants, and I'll be quick because I know we're running out of time, but the main thing that the young people went to when they were vetting organizations to decide who should get grants was their social media, because they were like, if they're serving me, they're going to find me on social media, and they're not going to find me on Facebook because that's y'all over there. They're going to find me on TikTok and IG. And when they looked at the IG, they were looking at like, what is the imagery you're using? Are you talking to me? What's the language that you're using?
Wow.
And so for us, when we think about, you know, we don't have a TikTok yet, although it's in the works. But I will say that we try to be really interactive with our social media. Like when we do chats and we have IG lives sometimes and things like that, that allow people to really feel who you are. And then people will DM us and tell us about their work. That's how we've been able to find some really beautiful organizations, particularly in states where our staff doesn't live or we don't have relationships. And so I think I could not underscore what Kylee was saying, especially if you're working with young people. Like, you have to communicate with them in the ways and the places, like go to the places they are, and they're on the internets. And so I think it's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. I sorry, I just looked away because they're telling me we are running out of time. And there is a question from the room. But Erica, I want you to play the same thing about social media. We joked about the AOL man and the whole thing. So, you know, we're kindred spirits. But I mean, like we said, like I started this session out, you can't just say I'm an older person and I'm not going to learn this stuff, gang. No, we got to learn it. You know, I mean, my kids are like, Dad, you're like always on Instagram. And I'm like, there's a lot of dopamine on Instagram.
Yeah, real briefly, I think using social media as a networking tool or storytelling tool. I had actually we had only been doing Facebook and Instagram, which was really telling the stories of what's in the museum to parents and to the parents who are going to bring their kids. And we just launched our LinkedIn almost 2 years ago now. But when I was here, because I'm like, there's a whole world. I want to talk about our impact. I want everything that
I want to see you on LinkedIn though. Like that's where like as much as like Instagram, I'll put a picture up, but business, man, that's where, now listen, that might not be your constituents, might not be,
but there are board members,
but they're board members, big funders. Right. Right. So gang, don't sleep on LinkedIn. Don't sleep on it. Please.
Yeah. And where there's a discussion around the education field, like in museum field, that happens a lot on LinkedIn. We want to be part of that. And I think you have to think about where are you part of the discussion for your field, who we're like museums and education, as well as the community, Long Island. And, it all overlaps, and being conscious of the audience you're talking to is it's the only way to go with social media.
100%. So there's a quick question. Let's see if we could address this for Priya Permal Thomas. She says, thank you for taking questions. At Ascension Village, we currently have a young authors workshop for teenagers where our organization assists attendees through 6 sessions in developing, editing, and publishing their book on Amazon. Shout out to you. That's awesome. The Amazon account would be set up by their guardian, and money earned would go to each child's account towards college. We're having a hard time raising funds to pay for graphic designing of the book covers. Any ideas on who I should network with? Well, here's what I want to say, and then I'll let my panelists jump in. Shout out Spirit of Huntington Art Center. Let's get you connected to Spirit of Huntington. I'm a board member there. They have an artworks program, and their artworks program educates individuals with intellectual developmental disabilities on how to do marketing, website design, social media, SEO, the whole thing. My panel, Erika, you're first. Any idea on that one?
I did think about the Spirit of Huntington. I've heard of, haven't used a program called Fiverr, or there's some folks out there. If you need low cost graphic design, you can send it out, and like for $5 or $25, you don't know what you're going to get back, but there are graphic designers who want to help nonprofits and people that you can send stuff out and it comes back and isn't as cost effective. I'm not sure where you'd go for grants unless it relates to the mission of the organization, but there are some low cost graphic resources that you might try out too.
All right. Any of my other friends have anything they want to jump in on that offer there?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, I think, I don't know kind of what the foundations, the types of foundations that are funding your work, but you're at the intersection of arts, education, and financial literacy, actually. So I would look at some of the foundations that are resourcing financial broadly for funding. I think, but I would underscore, Erica, there are not only Fiverr, which is a great resource, but also like, there are companies and comms spaces that do graphic design that will sometimes do volunteer and pro bono things. So sometimes it's just about putting it out to your network to say, who
Right
knows a
on.
graphic designer who wants to volunteer sometime.
Yep. Before you answer that too, Kylie, Priya, get it on LinkedIn, put it out on Instagram, ask your community. Kylie, what about you? Have any resources there?
One is Catch a Fire. It's kind of similar to Fiverr, but they actually offer volunteer opportunities too. So definitely look there. My other one is please reach out to your local high school and colleges. So many young professionals are looking to build portfolios. Please compensate them if you can, but you can do it on smaller budgets, and they're looking to build their resumes, and it's a great resource.
What a great point too, compensating people. It's a few bucks changes somebody's situation. And like, there's that whole thing like, oh, it's an unpaid internship. Really? Does it have to be? Let's get people some paid, right? That's a whole nother show. That's a whole nother day. I'll rant on it. We can't do that now. Maheen, Kaleem, if they want to get in touch with you and they want to follow what Grantmakers for Girls of Color, how do people pay attention?
Yeah, I'll throw it in the chat, but it's at G4GC, Grantmakers for Girls of Color on Facebook and LinkedIn. And then I shared my LinkedIn in the chat, so you're welcome to find me.
Perfect. Thank you. Kylee McGrane-Zarnoch, how do we keep in touch with you?
Yes, absolutely. So definitely, I linked my LinkedIn above. You can follow A Moment of Magic at amomentofmagic.org. And I'm bridging out and doing a little bit of more speaking and consulting. So I'll add my website here as well.
Ooh, new things. Sounds like you got to come on Philanthropy in Focus and tell that story. That's a whole new story. Erika, how about you? LICM, how do we keep in touch?
Yep, licm.org, our website, is a great resource for everything. I'm on LinkedIn. I'll get my chat in there. And we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. We have not figured out TikTok, but that's also not our prime audience because those folks don't have kids yet. So when they get kids, we'll hit them on Instagram.
Right. Well, I don't think anybody's figured out TikTok, to be honest with you. Maybe the TikTok people. Listen, gang, this has been incredible. How do you keep in touch with me? TommyD.NYC on the Instagram. I love LinkedIn. So Tommy DiMisa, DIMISA. I think that's how you spell it. And then don't forget our agency, what I actually do for a living, Vanguard Benefits, VanguardBenefitsUYOU.com. That website was put together by the neurodiverse team at the Spirit of Huntington Art Center. So, kind of I put up my money where my mouth is. Now we're going to have, as we break here, you have a 5-minute break when you go back to the lobby. And then Mastering PR session, we'll start with Kerry Gillen Goldberg and Jen Oliva. Make it a great day, everybody. Thank you, Erika. Thank you, Maheen. Thank you, Kylie. I appreciate you all. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.